Matanva Kimarahu, Ishmisha Chris Taylor. Can I keep going in Gaelic or will I switch to English? Good, I'm glad you're laughing because that's it. That's all my Gaelic. And I hope there's no Gaelic speakers in the room who will pick me up because that was probably terrible. Good morning, how are you? My name is Chris Taylor. I'm a development director with Visit Scotland, so we're the national tourist board for Scotland. Our job is to drive the visitor economy and to grow the value of tourism to Scotland. Value. And I'll say a bit more about what value means and how we interpret value, but that's our mission. You're going to see a lot of purple today, apologize for that. And let's just crack on. So this is plan A. Sometimes I talk for longer and sometimes I talk for shorter. We'll see. This is what I'm hoping to cover. We'll see how far we get. So I want to give you a bit of a sense on tourism in Scotland and what that looks and feels like. I'm going to talk about the last 10 years because like many countries, it's been from sort of 2014-15 when we've seen a sharp increase in visitor numbers. And for Scotland, a lot of that increase has driven into more rural areas, more scenic areas, more remote parts of the country with smaller populations and small villages. And it's about how we manage that. And over the course of the last couple of days when I've been talking to colleagues from Iceland, from New Zealand, from the States, everybody is nodding, yeah? Everybody's got the same type of issues and the same sort of challenges. And I hope today is a really important conversation in how we deal with that. None of us have all the answers, but I think we can all learn a lot from each other. And I hope that this is the start of that conversation and not the end of it. So, please, over the course of today and following, please get in touch, please ask questions, please see how we can help each other because this is very important for all of us. I would also like to extend my thanks to everybody here, to all of you for coming along and being involved in this conversation, and to Johannes and Arnar and the whole team who've pulled on today, who've done an excellent job. So thank you very much from me, from Visit Scotland. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. So I'm going to talk about that 10 years of growth and of visitor management. I'm going to have a look at some individual case studies within Scotland and how we've been managing tourism, and a little bit of a look ahead. Forget questions, that's already changed, so we're going to do questions as part of the panel later. So, 5.5 million people in Scotland. But 90% in that central belt. Let's see if I can use this. So this section of Scotland is where 90% of the population live. The Highlands and Islands, which we're going to talk about this morning, 10% of the population. So half of the country, 10% of the people. And it's urbanizing. So we've seen that shift of people moving into towns, into villages, into cities, and generally away from rural areas. But overall, the population is growing. And when we look at the Highlands and Islands, so the north and the west half of Scotland, which is what I am responsible for at Visit Scotland, population of around 500,000 people, so not dissimilar, but it's a story of population decline. And you can see the dark red is a population drop greater than 25%. So this is over the last decade. We're seeing people moving out of the rural areas for a whole range of factors and issues, but it's a story of decline. And of working age population as well, which is a worry, and the forecasts into the future do not look good for population. So this is a very serious challenge. And of course, tourism is one of those industries that can create buzz, vitality, support jobs, and create employment in our very rural communities. And that's the dimension that we're grappling with. How do you use tourism as a force for good, as a driver of economic and social activity, but do it in a way that achieves that balance with the environment and with what local people are looking for. So I'm now going to zone in a little bit more and talk about the Highlands. So the Highlands of Scotland are the focus for the next section. Highlands are very famous. People are coming for landscape, for history, heritage, for castles that have fallen down, castles that have not yet fallen down. For our whiskey, of course, whiskey tourism is huge. We export 43 bottles of whiskey every second. 43 bottles every second. So anywhere you go in the world, you can be assured of a dram. But it's scenery that people are coming for. It's this landscape that's driving visits to Scotland. And that's creating a strong visitor economy. So 1.9 million overnight visitors in Highlands, 6.6 million day visits. And it's the international market that's driven a lot of that in the last couple of years. We've seen a huge, huge growth in the volume, particularly of North America. So in 2023, our international numbers were up about 24% on volume and 19% on spend. So massive growth on top of an already very, very strong performance. And the Highlands is one of those bucket list destinations. So people come to Scotland, they want to do Edinburgh, and they want to do the Highlands. And it does have that kind of allure. It always performs in the top 2 or 3 at a UK level as well. So this is the draw that is pulling people north. So in terms of the international markets that have been behind all that growth, you can see the dominance of the US. And US spending for us is about 4 to 1 versus the domestic markets, and about 2 to 1 for our European markets. So very important in terms of that mission that we have of growing the value. But our domestic market's important because that extends the season. They will come throughout the whole year. They will return. They'll come multiple times. But we've been facing a cost of living pressure in Britain, and that has suppressed that market. So we've seen people pulling back on their ancillary spending. They're staying for a shorter duration. They're not buying the bottles of wine in the hotel and the nice meals and the tours. They're having a much more constrained holiday, but still very important because that's extending trips out into the shoulder months when we don't have that international visitation. And when we talk about domestic, we're talking largely about the rest of the UK. So about 2/3 of our domestic market is coming from England, and about 1/3 is Scottish people holidaying at home. This is just an average shot of our English market. They all look like this. We're very good friends with all of our English neighbours, and all these stories about a rivalry between Scotland and England are not true, of course. And all Scottish people look like this. So that's the myth busting out of the way. And whenever I travel, because we're such good neighbours, I'm always very interested to see stories and interpretation about England when I travel. The last time I was here was in 2016. And I went into many of the attractions and exhibitions. You had a wonderful exhibition all about England, which I enjoyed very much. It was this one. This is my son, who was 8 years old at the time. He loved it as well, so thank you for that. Is it still there? Do you still in the museum? Yeah, okay. So back to visitor management, sorry, indulge me. 2016 was also when we started to see a very big growth in the volume of visitors. So back at home, tourism was looking something like this. And these pictures are common. So you can see on the, where's my pointer? Oh, sorry, pointer. The top left here, everybody looking for the Instagram shot. The police having to be called to manage access into a commercial business because the pressures are so huge. So this bottom, your left, bottom left, top right, it's the same site. And you can see the car park. So where this police car is the same as where this car is. Now these coaches have not been able to get into the car park, and they've driven out and parked on the main road. So those coaches are stopped there. You can see a lady with a pram trying to cross the road. This is a 60-mile-an-hour main road, so this is one of the key roads. And these are the sorts of issues that we've been dealing with and trying to find ways to manage. And of course, a very large growth in motorhomes, because remember, our market is largely domestic, so we have a huge number of motorhomes. That touring product is really big for us. I think the motorhome in the middle here has decided they've had enough of life, and yeah, okay. And of course, the media reaction to all of this. So this is 2018, 2019. We're starting to see the word over-tourism come in. Stories here across a range of big titles in the UK, The Guardian, Telegraph, BBC website, you know, don't come. Scotland's full. And a perception in visitors that they're not welcome, which is a real big concern. So one of the first things we looked at was a national approach to visitor management. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what that looks and feels like to us as a national tourist board. So our job is to market the country. We provide some funding around infrastructure. We have supportive events. We work with businesses, very importantly, to help businesses grow and thrive. But we don't manage sites directly. We have a huge number of organizations, and do you know the term alphabet soup? Is that something you, yeah? So all of that, loads of agencies who all have to kind of come together and who all have a slightly different but complementary role in visitor management. And part of the challenge for us is how do we bring all that together? So I'm going to talk a bit about the national approach from the perspective of a national tourist board. So we created at a Scotland level our visitor management strategy, and there's links to it on the slide, and you can dig into that later if you're interested, or come and talk to me. But that had all the key agencies, the land management organizations, the environment organizations, national government, local government, the national parks, private landowners, roads, police, everybody. And we set out a set of principles that we were trying to achieve for visitor management. First and foremost, to encourage access and enjoyment. This is an opportunity, and I don't say that glibly. It's genuinely an opportunity to help people have a better time, enjoy more, explore more, and that was a key driver for us, especially with new audiences. And post-COVID, we'd seen a big shift from a lot of our traditional markets to a younger domestic audience, many of whom hadn't been to Scotland before, many of whom were not familiar with moving and camping and driving and so forth in very rural areas. Consistent messaging was key. So what we discovered was a lot of these different agencies, they're all saying more or less the same thing, but they're saying it in a different way. And they're using different language, different logos, different images. And visitors are seeing this big plethora of signs, social ads, leaflets, brochures, and so on, that all looks and feels different. And they don't know which one is the official way to do things or which bit, and they end up turning off. So we spent a lot of time just trying to cut through some of that, trying to agree at a national level the consistent messages and the clear kind of look and feel. And we wanted to give visitors guidance about how to do the right thing, because almost no visitors want to turn up and cause problems. They want to enjoy themselves, they want to have a nice holiday, they want to feel welcome, and they want to feel good about it. So it's how do we give people the information that they need in order to do the right thing? We also wanted to create this sense of ownership among visitors. Not that they're being told what to do, but they are proud to do the right thing. And then we tried to amplify that by getting visitors to share those messages. And I'll touch on some of that in a second. Planning ahead was critical. The perception up until this point was Scotland's a big country. It's beautiful, but it's empty. There's loads of space. You can go where you like, when you like. And that mental shift to get people to plan ahead And on the flip side, for the business community to have products and experiences and services that are visible, bookable, discoverable ahead of time was important as well. So that was the national group. And then we set up a number of working groups, obviously, around the operational stuff, which was looking at capacity and visitor management pressures across Scotland, and I'll say a bit around that. Motorhomes, I'm not really going to say much on motorhomes today, but I can do. I can bore you for many days about motorhomes. And groups looking at marketing, getting that message right, and technology. So about this time, we also started to run a lot of trials with some of the universities and the innovation centres in Scotland around remote sensing and big data connected with visitor management. And the final point is just around this access arrangements in Scotland, because everywhere's different, yeah? Everywhere's got different roles and responsibilities for local government, national government, different access rights, different ideas around a right to roam or something similar. So for Scotland, most of our land is privately owned. Around 3/4 is privately owned, and the government and national agencies own very little land. So that direct control is reduced. And we have a right to responsible access. So this is it's not a right to roam. It's often called a right to roam, but it's not. It's a conditional right. So you have a right to access the countryside if you behave responsibly. And what that means is defined in the Scottish Outdoor Access Code, which almost nobody has ever read. And this presents a number of kind of challenges for people. It doesn't apply to motor vehicles. So you do not have a right to go anywhere in your car off the public roads. And there are some exclusions around private land, farm, agriculture operations, and certain other sites. But generally, people can go where they want to if they're on foot. That means we can't charge for access to the countryside. So that tool or that lever is generally not open to us. So we're then taking down a route of on-site, looking at parking and toilets and other facilities and services that you can charge for and you can manage to try and control that pressure in rural areas. But before we get into the site-specific stuff, I want to just take a little step back because we're a national tourist board. So a lot of what we want to do is try and address some of this behavior and perceptions and ideas about where people can go and how they may behave before they get here. Because once they arrive at your site, your options are clearly much more limited to those kind of physical interventions. So we talk about the whole customer journey, a kind of end-to-end customer journey. So people will start with this sort of see, think, plan, do, advocate, yeah? And that might take 8 months. That might take a year and a half for people to move through these steps. And at all these points, when you're planning your next holiday to Scotland in 2025 or 2026, you're starting to think about when am I going to go? Where am I going to go? What am I going to do when I get there? Where am I going to stay? What are the activities and options that are open to me? So at all of these points, we want to be talking about here's your opportunity to go off-season in the quieter times, to visit some areas that are out with our iconic sites, to explore a bit further, and to behave responsibly when you get there. And we talk to people about what that means and what that looks and feels like. So each step in that journey, we have clearly a number of different channels that we will work through to try and get these messages out across to visitors. So we developed a hero hub help model because we're a marketing agency and we love this kind of stuff. A little bit of jargon goes a long way. So we start at the top with the hero, which is providing that inspiration, the emotional hook, the drivers of travel. And then we get into a bit more tactical messaging around visitor management, So thinking about where to go, thinking about locations that might have capacity, thinking about time of year. And at the help, it's that more tactical thing. Leave the car at home for a day. Think about buying local food, arts, crafts, ways to just subtly put these ideas in people's head when they're at that planning and booking stage. We zoned in on a number of key themes that were important across Scotland. So camping. Wild camping is a very misunderstood term in Scotland, but camping out with formal campsites. Lighting fires in the countryside we had a big issue with. Despite being an enormously wet country, we have a big problem with wildfires. Water safety was increasing, and I imagine, like many places, huge increase in the number of wild swimming and paddle boards and access to waterfalls and natural sites, so water safety was huge. Litter, motorhomes, and so forth. So the images at the bottom are some of the brand neutral assets that we developed. So we created a common look and feel that anybody could use, any agency, any business, any organization, any tourist group, so that visitors were getting something that looked and felt similar, and the messaging was consistent. Very simple hashtags: respect, protect, enjoy. Had a lot of traction, and it was all about giving information to visitors that allowed them to have a better experience. Lots of big numbers, but the headline is very, very successful piece of work. We had huge amounts of traction, including some of the more traditional forms that we've maybe pulled back from. So things like radio advertising and out of home. So that's big billboard advertising, for example. Very, very important. And all of this starting to shift the dial in how visitors are thinking about their interaction with the environment. And you can see in the bottom there feedback from some of those agencies around the marked decrease in campfires, for example, in people being keeping dogs on leads, interaction with our ranger services, for example, being much more positive. So you could see the direct impact of some of that marketing activity. What did we learn from that? The agreed and consistent messages was so important, because giving visitors something that looks and feels different is just off-putting, and they switch off. So that consistent messaging across the whole journey was really important. For the more tactical stuff, starting in March for us, start of the season worked really well. And we found if we get the first 4-6 weeks right, then the rest of the season is much easier. That kind of front loading of the push was very important. Influencers helped get these messages out beyond our normal audience. There are many people who don't interact with our Visit Scotland channels, so we needed to reach further. And the landowner partnership was really good as well. So while we had this national group, we had a number of local groupings of business, landowners, rangers, all feeding into this assessment about what was important and where the pressure points were. So that interaction between local and national, and the ability to dial up or dial down the marketing and promotion and messaging around that was very important. And it allowed us to be quite agile. So I don't know if it's a big thing in Iceland, but we've had a big rise in tent boxes, for example, kind of Land Rovers with the tents on the roof. Wild swimming's been huge, so it allowed us to make some tactical shifts around how we deal with these things at a country level. Okay, how are we doing for time? Not bad. Let me run through a number of examples of what that looks like in practice. So the first one I'm going to talk about is Glenfinnan. Glenfinnan is a very important site in Scotland. The monument you can see, where's my pointer? Here. So this was the very important site for the Jacobite rebellion and the whole story of the Jacobites from 1745-46 in Scotland all started around in Glenfinnan, and the standard was raised at that monument, and this was Bonnie Prince Charlie's kind of drive for power, very important. So we have a monument here, we have a visitor centre in here, which was built for the monument. It gets around, or it got around 30,000 visitors a year. We have a small car park here. Over on the right here is a hotel, and just out of shot there are several other businesses scattered around. So this is a small village. It's maybe 2 hours drive from Glasgow, from that central belt where all the people are, remember? So it's a easy day trip from Glasgow. But it's a small village and it's remote. And then in 2002, so this is the Glenfinnan Viaduct. This is just behind, so the viaduct is just in here out of shot. Famous steam train in 2002. This train was used in a film. Anybody know which film? Yeah? Someone? James? No? Close? Anybody else? Harry Potter. Okay, so this is the Hogwarts Express, if you know Harry Potter. And this train runs 4 times a day from Fort William to Mallaig. It's about 20 miles, and it goes backwards and forwards. And it was featured in the film. So I don't know if you remember, there's a bit with a flying car that kind of comes in, and they chase the train off to Hogwarts. So the visitor numbers then went from 30,000 to 600,000. And these are some of the images that I showed earlier. These are all from Glenfinnan. So these 600,000 people are all trying to get a photo of that train, which comes 4 times a day. So they all arrive 10 minutes before the train, and they go, ah! 600,000 people trying to park, trying to get up, trying to get a viewpoint. And this is where the police have been called, and I talked before about coaches and the problems here. In a village with 200 people that's quite remote on the west coast of Scotland, not much infrastructure, actually quite far from the local police station, and the police need to deal with road traffic accidents and crime and all sorts of other things. They don't want to be dealing with visitors. So, what do we do? What are our options? The first thing was to look at the site. So this is the visitor centre here. The viaduct runs up the back, and we had some land here. And there's a community organisation, Askio. It's a charitable organisation in Scotland that is owned and managed by the local residents. So they took over an additional car park next to the original car park, and that gave income that went back into the local community. It didn't immediately solve pressure, but it gave the local community a stake in what was going on. It gave them a voice, and it gave them some money to start to think about options and what might be possible. Visit Scotland has funded quite a lot of this work, and in addition to the extra parking, there's been new footpaths and bridges and improved access to try and get some of those people off the hillside and into a more managed landscape. But the key thing was to start to look at what that visitor behavior and that pattern. And effectively, we had 2 types of visitors. There were people who were coming to get the shot of the train, and there were people who wanted a much broader, deeper engagement with the area, so the slow tourism visitors. And on the right here, you can see the village. So this is where most of the people live. This is the viaduct up here. This is the parking down here. So how do you create a much wider experience with more products, more services, more opportunities, extend the length of stay? And that then lead into the management, the master planning work, managing coaches, so coaches now have to pre-book and have to pay, and that's been very successful in getting those coaches off the road. There was an awful lot of work that we had to do in the village to make the village more robust and resilient, so physical interventions with bollards and barricades to stop people parking, and double yellow lining to make it illegal. A lot of information about how to visit responsibly, and actually the best way to see this is to come on the train. So as well as the steam train, there are 10 or 12 other trains that come to Glenfinnan every day. So we're trying to get people to access the site in a more sustainable way, and trying to talk much more broadly, like this is much more than just a Harry Potter train. There's a much wider experience here. The ultimate answers will be a new visitor centre, because this is one of the iconic sites in Scotland. This is one of the, it's up in the top 10 visited sites. So the infrastructure needs to be much more robust. And that wider destination experience is very important. Okay. Let me skip through some of this quite quick. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Skye. Skye is an island on the west coast of Scotland, but accessible by a bridge. So it's an island, but not an island. But it gives an island experience. And Skye was the #1 place at the front of all the over-tourism conversations in Scotland. Skye was the poster boy for over-tourism. Whenever any journalist wanted to write a story about over-tourism, they would slap an image of Skye, possibly this image. This is the fairy pools, by the way, down in the southwest of Skye. A very, very kind of famous place. Just to give you a feel for what that looks like, those pools are up here. This is the main road, which is a single-track road. So, do you have much single-track roads in Iceland? Basically, cars can't pass. Yeah, it's only wide enough for one car, so you have a passing place where the cars can pass. Very, very common across the north of Scotland. And at the end of this single-track road, there are also a small village of about 200 people. So the fairy pools in 2017-18 was getting about 60,000 people. It now does 280,000 people, so huge, huge increase. And you can see people starting to walk down here over a stream, a small river, and up to the site. It's maybe 10-minute walk from the road up to the site. And the solution here was very similar. So we can't charge for access. But what we did was work with the community that lived down at the end to understand what they're looking for. And first and foremost, they want access down this road. Similar to what Susie was saying, you can see before the bollards went in, people would park along the side here, and that would block access for fire service, for ambulances, for food deliveries, for waste collection, everything. So this village at the end was essentially cut off. So what we did was work with the village to help them buy some land, which is just out of shot here. I apologize for that. So the community took ownership of the land. The community introduced a small car park here, and the community gets the income from that car park. That also funds a couple of jobs in running that. There's a ranger basin there and some toilets that also brings in income. The bollarding was put in along the side of the road so the community can get in, and the money that's raised from the parking and the toilets has funded footpath work, bridge repairs, and environmental improvements up to the fairy pools. Right, skip over some of that. Yeah, similar example here. So this is another point on Skye at the store. This is the same image in the top left and bottom left. And you can see how they improved parking. This is a small visitor centre, all charged for. So in the top, this is all free parking. The 2 yellow lines means it's illegal to park here. But the challenge we have is enforcement, yeah, and enforcement powers. So the hard bollards have stopped illegal parking, and it's pushed people where they should be. And there's an improved experience because there's a new interpretation center, and these are some of the footpaths that run up to the store. The stores, this is where another big kind of film location, so a lot of Game of Thrones was filmed around here, and a few other films as well. Okay, so a lot of this has been funded by government money moving through Visit Scotland into the Rural Tourism Infrastructure Fund. So since 2018, we've delivered over 76 of these types of projects with councils and with communities to try and improve the facilities for visitors and try and generate some income for local communities and try and improve the management of these sites. Let me skip over this. I'm not going to talk about North Coast 500 because I'm pushed for time. Come and chat to me later if you want to know about North Coast 500. But let me just pick up on some of the considerations that we're dealing with. So, who decides? Who makes the decision about capacity, or indeed, how much tourism is desirable? Not an easy question. The data and the context is very, very important. So some of the locations I've talked about where there are very real pressure at some of our iconic sites are a very small part of Scotland. Generally, tourism in Scotland, and I'm sure tourism in Iceland, operates fantastically well most of the year, most of the places. Visitors have a great experience and things work very well. So we're talking about that context, that balance being very, very important. How do we identify those areas with capacity? And what does that conversation need to look like? And how do we plan further into the future? So when we started with that rural investment fund that supported a lot of those projects, that was putting sticking plasters on the stuff that was really, really sore. And a couple of years ago, we started to flip this. And we said, we need to look 10, 15 years ahead. We need to think about what sort of infrastructure our visitors of the future are going to be needing. Okay, let me run through this quite quick as well. So we asked residents their views about tourism. What do people who live in the Highlands think about tourism? And actually, that's not surprising. People have got a very good, balanced, measured view about tourism. They understand how it operates. They understand the benefits that it can bring. They also understand some of the challenges that tourism can bring. We asked local people whether they feel the balance is skewed too heavily towards business and visitors or local issues. And again, people think marginally it's swinging a little bit towards the business community, but actually it's quite balanced. So people have a reasonable, nuanced understanding about tourism and how it works. The issues attributed to visitors, I'm sure these will be similar in many places. Litter, facilities, a lot around parking and driving and motorhomes. That's been a big one for us, and again, because of this big domestic audience and big kind of touring nature. But we also asked, what issues do you attribute to local people who live in the area? And it's a similar range of issues. So people have quite a good understanding that actually it's not just tourism that cause issues. Local people cause some of these issues as well, and we need a much more grown-up conversation about how we solve some of these. Overall, though, on balance, how do our residents feel about tourism? Very, very positive. 94% positive. I was saying to somebody last night, this is not the story that you will see in the media. This is not a headline that the media will talk about, but it's very important. This evidence-based approach, it's very important. Okay, so last 50 seconds. Whew. Let's see how we go. Let me just touch on a couple of things very quickly. I want to flip back up to the national approach and how we manage capacity, because I've talked a bit around that. And I talked around a number of local groups that we have with input from businesses, from rangers, from land managers, from a range of people to try and have this conversation around how do we feel things are. Those people all sit in very different perspectives, different agencies, different organizations, different businesses. So we came up with a consistent, hopefully consistent, but kind of clear set of assessing whether we feel areas are under pressure. And there's a lot up there. I'm not going to run through the detail. But in effect, the green is things are working okay within the resources that we have. The ambers are where things are okay, but our resources are stretched, or we're having to do something a bit innovative or different to respond to the challenges. And the reds are where we are, we're really struggling, where they're beyond our ability to deal with. And there's a lot that sits behind that around some of those issues I touched on earlier around parking and behavior and fires and so on that feeds into this. But that's the overall assessment. And I thought it might just be helpful to show where we were in 2023. So down the left-hand side here are those locations that we've identified, those iconic sites where we know there's a lot of pressure. And then along the top, every 2 weeks, we're reporting on what that capacity and what that impact looks like. The headline here is it's mostly green. Yeah, tourism is operating very well in most parts of Scotland most of the time. And remember, this is not all of Scotland, these are only the sites that we've identified as being having particular pressure on them. So the rest of the country would be green as well. But you can see clearly, start of the summer, May, June, good weekends, sunny Easter weekends, that's where we started to see some pressure, this sort of flood out. So that informs our communications, it informs our thinking about how we deploy ranger services and the sort of tactical communications that we might put up. So remember, I talked about that hero, hub, and help. That sort of tactical messaging about where to go when we know at the start of the summer people are going to be responding in certain ways, that becomes very important. And then last couple of slides, this is about how we measure success. So I talked at the start about value and our mission being to grow the value of tourism, not the volume. And we try and break that down to what that value looks like for the industry, for businesses, very important. So we talk about fair work and profitability and the supply chain and understanding that value proposition for industry. For visitors as well, which is the quality of the experience that visitors can have and how that returns into local communities as well. So this is we call it the 4S model that we operate at Visit Scotland, and there's a lot of monitoring and evaluation behind that. Okay, nearly done. Wrapping up. So the National Visitor Management Group, we continue. That came out of COVID, but it's been phenomenally successful and important for us. That coordinated approach across a country, across agencies is key because we want to get people as aware as possible before they arrive in destination and before they arrive on site. So that interplay between the national messaging and the local visitor management is absolutely key. And we need to understand what visitors are looking for in this space. Quite often when you talk about visitor management, you end up talking about exciting pictures of potholes and car parks and coaches and worn out paths and environmental damage. And what I wanted to do is finish, so I have 60 seconds, I know I'm over time. Am I okay with 60 seconds? Thank you, I'm getting a nod. Just to talk about the fact that tourism is a positive force. Yeah, tourism creates a vitality and an energy and a buzz. And this is something that we've been working on in Visit Scotland, because a bit of research we did recently showed that when people start planning their next holiday, about 55% of people haven't yet thought about where they want to go. So for us, that nugget is really important in starting to think, A, how do we talk about Scotland, but B, how do we start getting some of these visitor management messages out? So let's see if this plays. We're good, thank you. Very much, everyone. Thank you for your time.